Okay, I think we'll make a start. Good afternoon. Thank you for attending our webinar on hair, drug and alcohol testing in family law. Today's webinar is a joint event with 14 barristers' chambers. I'm Liam Feasey. I'm the Client Services Manager and a reporting scientist at Lextox. I'd like to introduce my co-presenter, Ronan O'Donovan, who is Head of Chambers at 14. Before we start, just a bit of housekeeping. So each attendee can choose which presenter you would like to see on the larger screen by clicking on the presenter in the top right-hand corner of your screen. All attendees have been set to mute, so this is to reduce any background noise to ensure that everyone can hear us clearly. This is a live broadcast, so unfortunately we won't be taking any questions during today's webinar. If you do have any queries, please email us via experts@lextox.co.uk. Today's webinar will last approximately 30 minutes. It will be recorded and we'll share the recording with you post-event. So let's begin. So the starting point is to give you an introduction to Lextox for those of you who may not know who we are. So Lextox is established in the UK by experts from within the UK hair testing industry. Our aim is to provide the most reliable, legally defensible results and the most responsive, client-oriented service for family law cases and childcare proceedings. The analysis of hair for drugs and alcohol markers is in accordance with the Society of Hair Testing recommendations. Now, the Society of Hair Testing are a body of international experts and scientists in hair testing, and they meet annually to discuss the best practice for hair analysis and set down recommendations and guidelines. All of our expert reporting scientists are members of the Society of Hair Testing, and we participate in these discussions. We are a UK accredited testing laboratory to ISO 17025 UCAS testing standards, and UCAS is the United Kingdom Accreditation Service. So UCAS is the sole government recognised body who undertake competency audits to ensure the competency of the testing laboratory. So by having UCAS accreditation demonstrates our reliability and accuracy of the testing results. I'm the Client Services Manager and I'm also a reporting scientist at Lextox. I have over 16 years experience, including laboratory, quality assurance and reporting analytical results. And my role also advises solicitors, local authorities, barristers and the judiciary on the most appropriate testing for their casework. So a good starting point is to provide an overview of the analysis to give you a picture of what happens to the sample when it arrives at the laboratory and the stages the sample goes through at the laboratory to actually issuing the analysis results. So the starting point is receiving your formal instruction to us on the type of analysis that you would like us to undertake. So whether this is a month-by-month analysis or an overview analysis, and the number of drugs that you would like us to look for or alcohol markers. We issue a case-specific quotation the same day, and we can arrange the sample collection appointment immediately and usually collect the sample within about 48 hours notice. Alternatively, we can send the sample collection kit to a GP for the GP to take the sample if required. So upon sample collection, the sample is returned to our laboratory. Upon receipt, the first thing we do is inspect all of the security seals to ensure the integrity of the sample is maintained. We then align the hair and then cut the hair into the required sections. So whether this is 1 centimeter sections or 3 centimeter sections, depending on the type of analysis requested. All hair sections are then washed prior to analysis to remove any traces of substances on the outside of the hair. So what we're detecting and analysing is what has actually been incorporated into the hair itself. So we then take the hair from a solid material, we liquefy it into a liquid solution, and it's in the solution that we can extract the drugs and the alcohol markers from the hair solution itself, and then get an actual level of the drug or alcohol marker. So then that solution is analysed using very sensitive and specific confirmatory techniques. So this is GC-MS-MS or LC-MS-MS. And this actually obtains a concentration value of the level of substance detected. The results are then reviewed and interpreted by our reporting scientists who are based at the laboratory, and then we prepare the report and email that directly to yourselves. So the whole process from receiving the sample into our laboratory, undertaking the analysis, interpreting the results, and preparing the report and issuing that report takes less than 5 working days. So it's a very quick turnaround time. Okay, so a bit of the science behind hair testing. So we state that the scalp hair grows at an average rate of approximately 1 centimetre a month, as per the guidance of the Society of Hair Testing. Now, it's not possible to establish how fast or how slow an individual's hair is actually growing from a cut hair sample. So in order to provide an approximate time period, we do use the population average growth rate of 1 centimetre a month. So a 3 centimetre section of scalp hair would provide an approximate 3-month history of an individual's drug or alcohol use. And we can really go back as long as the hair allows. So if the hair is 12 centimetres in length, we can cover 1 year. If it's 6 centimetres, we can cover approximately 6 months. But the hair does have to be broken down into smaller sections for analysis. So whether this is 1 centimetre sections or 3 centimetre sections. Now, the way that the drugs actually get incorporated into the hair itself is after a drug enters the body, it is absorbed into the bloodstream. And every hair follicle has its own blood supply, feeding it with the nutrients that it needs in order for the hair to grow. So because the drug is in the bloodstream, as the hair is then growing, any drug which is in the bloodstream is incorporated into the root of the hair itself. Then as the hair grows out, the drugs remain locked or trapped in that section of hair. So because the drugs remain trapped and locked in that hair, they don't move up and down the hair strand itself, they remain trapped in that section, which is why we can correlate the level of drug detected back to an approximate time period. Now, there are occasions when individuals may have no scalp hair available for analysis, in which case we can collect and analyze body hair, and the analysis of body hair is still an accurate analysis for the detection of drugs, metabolites, and alcohol markers. However, body hair has a different growth cycle to that of scalp hair. So body hair has a greater proportion of hair in its non-growing or its resting phase. So about 40 to 60% of the body hair is not growing. So we have to consider this amount of hair in this non-growing phase when establishing the time period of a body hair sample. So estimating the time period of a body hair sample is more approximate. And generally, a body hair would cover between about 4 and 18 months, depending on the length of the body hair and where the body hair was actually collected from the body. Now, body hair samples have to be analysed as a whole sample, i.e. as an overview analysis. They're unable to be segmented into the month-by-month sections. And the body hair samples go through the same analytical process as a scalp hair. Now, we can analyze any body hair for the drugs. However, for the hair alcohol marker analysis, we can only analyze body hair from the chest, the forearm, or the leg regions. Okay, So the benefits of hair analysis, and the main benefit and the reason why it's so commonly used, is that hair provides this unique long window of detection covering a period of months. Whereas if you to compare that to oral fluid or urine testing, they generally cover the past few days. Whereas hair in a single test, providing the sufficient hair, can go back a number of months. And the sectional month-by-month analysis is really useful in showing a trend or a pattern of drug use over a period of time. So because you'd have a result for each individual result, you'll be able to see if the levels of drugs are increasing, decreasing, or intermittent over the period of time. And the drugs remain locked in the hair for as long as the hair is. So we can go back as long as the hair allows. And the length of the hair is the determining factor in how far back in time we can actually go. So if the individual has 6 centimeters, we can cover the past approximate 6 months, 9 centimeters, approximately 9 months, for example. And the sample collections can be observed. So you can witness the sample collection to ensure that the sample is being collected correctly, and it is less evasive than other samples to collect. Okay, so there are some considerations that you need to be aware of with using hair analysis. The first is that it does take approximately 2 weeks for the hair to grow sufficiently above the scalp or from the body for inclusion in a cut hair sample. So now the significance of this is that if you're looking to cover a particular month, say for example the whole of May, you would need to organise the sample collection towards the middle of June, because we remove 14 days from the date of sample collection to then start the analysis time period. So the hair analysis won't include any drugs used in the 2 weeks prior to the sample collection. So that's an important point to be aware of when trying to determine the time periods you need to cover. Because of that, hair is not appropriate for the recent detection of recent use, i.e. over the past day or the past few weeks. Hair is appropriate for a timeline in months only. So that's where oral fluid and urine testing may be useful to cover the past few days. And it's not currently possible, and this is with any test, whether it's hair, urine, or fluid, to determine the specific drug purity, the dose used, or the frequency of use. And that's because with the hair analysis, it's an integrated result for the whole time covered by that test, whether it's a 1-month section or a 3-month section. It's an integrated result for the whole of that time. So for that reason, we wouldn't be able to say if an individual has used drugs every single day within that time period, or every Saturday, for example. But what we do is provide an indication of whether the level detected is low, medium, or high. And the hair test is there to show the more repeated use of a drug. So the cutoff levels applied are there to show the repeated use of a drug over a period of time. Now, it's also not possible to relate the level found in the hair to the dose used. And that's because there's no pharmaceutical regulations on how illegal or street drugs are actually prepared. So they can be mixed with various different compounds, so therefore the purity can vary. So for that reason, we wouldn't be able to back calculate to an actual dose used. Now, a one-off use may actually go undetected, and that's because with a one-off use, the amount of drug used or ingested is very, very small. So it would be expected not to be above the cutoff to show the more repeated use of a drug. Okay. So this is a list of drugs that we can detect. I won't go through every single drug group, but what I will highlight is that a very good resource point is a website called Talk to Frank. This will list the drugs, any street names, and give you their classification and the possible effects that they could have on an individual. What I would highlight here is that the test that we do is very sensitive and very specific. So when we see a drug, for example, it can only be that drug and it can't be anything else. For example, with the opiates drug group, we look for the legal forms, which is codeine and dihydrocodeine, but we also look for the heroin-specific metabolite, which is 6-acetylmorphine. So we can tell the difference between codeine and dihydrocodeine use, which is the legal forms of opiates, and the illegal heroin use by the detection of 6-acetylmorphine. Now, the use of codeine wouldn't give a false positive for heroin use, because when we see 6-acetylmorphine, it can only be 6-acetylmorphine, and it can't be anything else. I will highlight here that we've developed a method to detect psychoactive substances. So these are formerly legal highs. So we developed a method to detect the most commonly used compounds to make up the psychoactive substances. So these are compounds which have been manufactured to mimic the effect of illegal drugs. We've also developed a method to detect synthetic cannabinoids. So this is synthetic cannabis. So this mimics the effect of cannabis. Okay. So as well as looking and detecting the parent drug, we also look for the metabolites. So a metabolite is a substance which is produced by the body when a drug is taken. So what happens is when a drug is taken, the body tries to break down that drug to eliminate it from the body. During that breakdown process, it produces these substances called metabolites. So the detection of a metabolite suggests that a drug has entered the body as opposed to an association with the drug. So there's two examples that we've listed there. One is, and this is for cannabis, so this is 11-hydroxy-delta-9 THC and 11-nor-delta-9 THC 9-carboxylic acid. So the presence of those metabolites would indicate the use of the drug as opposed to an association with the drug. So it's always worth looking out for the metabolites in the report. We will highlight them in the conclusion, and we will explain the presence of them in the conclusion. Okay, so moving on to hair alcohol testing. The detection of the hair alcohol markers in hair is very different to that of drugs. So with drugs, we're actually looking for the drug itself. With the alcohol markers, we're looking for two substances which are produced by the body when alcohol is ingested. So this is ETG, which is ethyl glucuronide, and ethyl palmitate, which is FAEE. So ETG and FAAE are produced by the body when alcohol is ingested, and the presence of them in a hair sample can be used to help assess chronic excessive alcohol consumption. The hair test is there to show the repeated use of alcohol over a period of time, i.e. chronic excessive alcohol use. The test isn't there to identify binge drinking or social drinking or abstinence. It is there to show the repeated use of alcohol. And chronic excessive alcohol use is defined as approximately 7.5 units of alcohol a day, every day, covered by the period of time of that test. So 7.5 units equates to about a bottle of wine every day, or 4 cans of regular strength lager generally. So over the course of a week, 7.5 units equates to about 52.5 units. So you could have a case where an individual may abstain from alcohol use the first few days of a week, and then consume 52.5 units over the course of towards the end of the week. Providing they were doing this on a weekly basis, that would be expected to provide a result for chronic excessive alcohol use. Now, as I said previously, body hair can be used, but it's only from hair collected from the chest, arm, or leg regions. With a scalp hair sample, the maximum time we can go back is 6 months, and that's in accordance with the Society of Hair Testing consensus. And it is analysed as an overview analysis. So hair testing for alcohol can't be segmented into month by month. It is just analysed as an overview analysis. We do recommend that the hair test is used in conjunction with the blood test. So there's 2 blood tests that we provide. This is carbohydrate deficient transferrin, which is the CDT test. So this is a biochemical test looking for changes in the blood due to recent chronic excessive alcohol use. So where the hair test is very good at looking back historically over a number of months, the blood test is very good at looking at more recent alcohol use. The liver function test provides a snapshot in time of potential liver damage. So it is just that moment in time that the blood was actually collected. And the liver can actually repair itself over a period of time. So the liver function test monitors levels of biomarkers that can be indicative of damage due to alcohol use. Now, other factors such as medication and health conditions can affect the liver function as well. Okay, so the role of hair testing in family law. So in September 2017, the Honourable Justice Peter Jackson assessed the science of hair testing and its importance in family law. The judgment reinforced the importance of hair testing in childcare casework, and the need for increased awareness for all participants in the system was also highlighted. The case emphasised the need for experienced experts in toxicological hair testing to accurately interpret the analysis results. And it was also emphasised that hair tests should be used as only a part of the overall evidential picture in childcare proceedings. And in the past 3 years, Lextox has dealt with an average of about 9,700 cases per year. So that nicely leads me on to Ronan. So I'll now hand over to Ronan, who will discuss the role of hair testing in family law cases. To see him more clearly, please click on his image in the top right-hand corner of your screen. So Ronan, thank you.
Thank you. Can I first start by saying that I'm having some technical difficulties. If I disappear, bear with me. I may need to log back on. Okay. So as Liam was saying, the reason I'm involved in this webinar is that I represented Lextox in the case of REH, which I think most family law practitioners have some idea about. At the time, it became quite well known because there was a concern that the results of the case could lead to question marks about the reliability of hair strand testing. Much of what I'm going to be talking about is what we should be taking away from the case of REH. I've set out the report there along with a link to Bailey. It was decided at the end of 2017, so it's about 18 months old now, but it does remain the most up-to-date case where the family courts considered the role of hair strand testing in family cases, and it remains good law. It does provide important guidance for practitioners. It's something that all family law practitioners who are going to deal with any sort of hair strand testing, they need to be aware of the guidance. The case particularly emphasised the issue of cocaine use because that was the issue in that particular case, but it does also give general guidance, and it is an important case, and it's one not just that you should read, but it's one to go back to when there's ever a question arising in terms of the evidence from hair strand testing. Now, REH doesn't stand alone. There is a line of relevant authorities which are referred to in REH. I've set them out there. I'm not going to go through each of those. We haven't got time to go through each of those cases, and to some extent they're dealt with in the case of REH anyway. But very in short, the Richmond London Borough Council case dealt specifically with the issue of alcohol testing. Bristol City Council, the drugs tested there were opiates and cocaine. And in a child, which has also been reported as London Borough of Islington and M&R, they dealt with cocaine, opiates, and particularly for that case, methamphetamines. So those are, again, important cases to look at if you are either seeking to challenge, indeed wanting to argue that it can be relied upon in a family law case. But dealing with REH, I'm not going to go through the case in any detail. I'm not going to go through the judgment in any detail. There is no substitute, I'm afraid, to reading it. But what I'm just going to pick out here is what I think are the most important parts of the judgment for practitioners and the matters which practitioners really need to rely on. The first is paragraph 28 of the judgment, which is a summary of what was agreed by the parties, and in particular the three testing agencies who intervened in the case, Lextox being one of them, what I've called technical propositions, scientific matters, so to speak, which were agreed between those testing organisations. And those are, again, from a legal point of view, a helpful introduction to understanding the science. Obviously, Liam has explained from Lextox's point of view how the science works. But paragraph 28, the emphasis is more about how we as practitioners are to understand the science. And it's a very useful introduction. Sections 1 to 7 of paragraph 28 are of general application. Sections 8 to 12 are specific to cocaine, but they're all of use to a practitioner in understanding testing and in particular how to align it within a family court arena. Again, I'm not going to go through all of them. They're long and they're detailed, and it's outside the remit of this webinar. But I have highlighted what I think are particular parts of paragraph 28 which practitioners should consider. I've put those in bold, and in brief, the two under paragraphs 1 to 7 deal with the issue of the rate of hair growth. That, as Liam explained, the test results go on an average of 1 centimetre growth per month, but that is only an average, and the differences can make a difference when one's trying to work out certainly the time window of use, where in particular, for example, you have an individual who's saying, I stopped at this particular date, and the test results seem to suggest that that is incorrect. Discrepancies in the hair strand use can make a difference, and it's important that we understand that if we want to look at whether or not the individual is actually being honest in terms of when they stop their drug use. And similarly, and again, Liam touched on this, that not all hair grows at the same time on the scalp. That can affect the test results, in particular when one is looking at the period of use. And again, it's just something to bear in mind when there is an apparent discrepancy to what an individual is reporting and what the test reports seem to suggest is the case. In paragraph 28, 8 to 12, again, as I said, deals specifically with cocaine use, and so are not particularly of general application. But again, I've highlighted one particular point, the issue of metabolites, that I think is particularly important when dealing with cocaine use, in that cocaine does break down in the environment as well as in the body. And cocaine, I think, of all the most common drugs that we would deal with, there is a high risk of external contamination. And again, as individuals and practitioners, we need to be aware that that is an area of questioning to what extent a hair strand test could be affected by external contamination. So those are matters which really, as practitioners, it's worthwhile considering when trying to understand the science as to be applied within a family context. The next paragraph I think it's important to concentrate on is paragraph 41, and this is the point about when looking at the reports and how the results are described in high, medium and low use. And I think many practitioners and judges are guilty of turning to the last page or the penultimate page of the report, looking where it says high cocaine use and taking that as proof that someone is a high user of cocaine. And what Mr. Justice Jackson was clear about, this is no criticism of the reporting agencies. We as practitioners are misunderstanding what the purpose of the description of the high, medium and low use is. I'm not going to go through it in detail because, again, it's outside the timescales of this case. But what you need to take away is that there is not a direct correlation between what is described as the high, medium, low use as in terms of levels found in the hair and proof that that individual is a high, medium or low user. And again, it's important as practitioners to look at that and really put these results in the context of any other evidence that there may be as to the extent of an individual's use. And then the other point I would, particular point, part of the case I ask you to look at is paragraph 59. Now, this is where Mr. Justice Jackson made various suggestions on what could be contained in reports from testing agencies. Now, clearly that was aimed particularly at the testing agencies, but I think it's a useful guide to practitioners on where we as practitioners may misinterpret some of the reports. And Mr. Justice Jackson's suggestions were there to help avoid those misinterpretations and misunderstandings. Again, not a criticism of the testing agencies, but just trying to make the report slightly more user-friendly to lawyers who might not understand the science. And again, it's, I think, useful to look at paragraph 59 because that may flag up where in the past, as practitioners, we may have misinterpreted or misunderstood the particular relevance of tests. So, what is the relevance for practitioners? Well, again, as I say, I can't replace the advantage of basically reading not just REH, but the other cases that went before REH to really give an understanding of how we should be treating hair strand test results as evidence. But what is absolutely clear, what we can take away from REH, is that the underlying science of hair strand testing is sound. The reason why REH became a potentially important case was that there was a suggestion from some experts that the whole basis of hair strand testing was not sound, that the results couldn't be relied upon, and of course that was going to cause some consternation if it was felt that not just in the future we couldn't rely on hair strand testing, but that perhaps in the past decisions had been made based on what was ultimately false science. And what Mr. Justice Jackson was very clear about, having had the benefit of the intervention of the three testing companies, is that the science itself is sound. But what we as practitioners need to be clear about is how we interpret that science and how it's relied upon within the context of family law and the law of evidence and so on. So there are several additional important messages that we as practitioners need to take away from REH. And I say that those are in effectively two categories: is what weight, and I mean evidential weight, should be given to the results in hair strand test reports, and also how should we as practitioners interpret those results. So if I deal first with the issue of weight, it may seem obvious, but I think that a lot of practitioners and judges are guilty of this, that hair strand test results are evidence, but they're not proof. Just like any other piece of evidence, they are part of the overall circumstances upon which the court needs to make a finding, but they are not incontrovertible proof in themselves, and they should be treated just as you treat all other types of evidence. And Mr. Justice Jackson was very clear about that, and indeed made a specific footnote in his report, in his judgment, that when we talk about hair strand test results, they are evidence, but they are not proof of use. The onus remains on the party seeking a positive finding, whether it's a finding of use or not use, to prove that. And again, what needs to be avoided, which has sometimes, I think, happened in the past, is that the burden of proof seems to be reversed. Someone comes to court with what they say is a positive hair strand test, and the other party against whom it is alleged they've used drugs somehow has to prove that they haven't used it. And of course, that's not right. It still has to be on the person who is seeking to a finding that they have to prove it. And again, what's important in terms of evidence, not proof, and the burden of proof, is that the results need to be put in the context of the broader picture. And the court can take into account other matters when making a decision about what weight to give to the hair strand test results. And in practice, I think what that's more likely to deal with is where there appears to be a negative test, where it seems that the hair strand test results show that there wasn't use, and yet there may be other evidence which suggests that a person was using drugs at the time, and then the court is not bound by, in inverted commas, a negative test to say, well, I have to treat this person as not having used drugs, because there may be other evidence upon which they can make that finding. Dealing with, I think, perhaps the more tricky issues about how the results should be interpreted. What Mr. Justice Jackson was very clear about is the actual results of hair strand testing are merely numbers. They are figures which are produced by very complicated machinery, breaking down, as Liam explained, the hair and producing figures. The results themselves are merely figures. What we need is someone to interpret those results, and the interpretation of those results is the remit of experts. It is not for us as practitioners or the judge to look at some figures and try and take a view as what those figures mean. We need someone to interpret those figures, and Mr. Justice Jackson was also very clear that the reporting scientists and toxicologists who sign off on those reports from the hair strand testing agencies are experts. Now, what that means for us as practitioners is we should be treating hair strand test reports as you would with any other expert report. What does that mean in practice? Well, one of the things I think is perhaps maybe new to some practitioners is treating the request for a hair strand test as you would a letter of instruction. You wouldn't send off a letter of instruction to an expert without giving some idea of the background and the relevant information. And I think we as practitioners need to do better in identifying those matters that may be relevant to the interpretation of the hair strand results, not the results themselves, but their interpretation. Now, obviously, one of the questions we normally ask our clients is, well, are you going to declare any drug use? But there are other matters that may be relevant. It may be relevant whether that individual was in an environment where there was drugs in the environment, which may increase the risk of external contamination. It may be relevant if that person has some physiological issue which may affect both their hair growth rate and how the body metabolizes it. And a common one, for example, is pregnancy, which can have an effect on hair growth rate. Ethnicity can also be relevant to both hair growth rate and to how the metabolite is stored in the hair. So these are all matters that it might be worthwhile putting in the original report, in the original request, to put the results in context. The other point I would definitely say, and again, it may seem very obvious, but is to read the whole report. Again, as I said earlier, I think some practitioners have been guilty of going to the last page and saying this is what the result is, but you need to have the whole report. You need to put the conclusion in context to see whether there are any further questions that need to be raised, or any further information that needs to be provided to the testing centre. I've dealt with the issue of high, medium, low. I'm not going to go over that again. But again, as I said, as any other expert, do consider the issue of raising additional questions, and don't be scared to say to a judge that you need to call the author of the report. As I've said, these are reports which are interpreted by experts, and just like any other expert, there is no reason why we as practitioners should not seek permission to challenge that evidence, to put further questions to the authors of the report, so the court has all the relevant information before making a finding on what relevance the results of the hair strand tests have to your case. Excuse me, I've just gone too far. The other point which I would say is, and again, which has been very helpful at the start of this webinar, is understanding the science. We can't understand it completely. That's why we have these experts interpreting the results. But try to understand some aspects of the science, because, as I said, it will help you both in identifying what information should be included in the original request and what further questions or follow-ups, or indeed further testing, may be necessary. And again, without wanting to repeat what Liam has said, and without wanting to go outside my area of expertise, some points which it's worthwhile understanding a bit better are what the relevance of the cut-off levels are. The cut-off levels are not there to prove whether or not someone is used. They're there to try and make sure that the test results are as accurate as possible. And what was clear from REH is that just because the level of drug the amount of drug in a hair is below the cut-off levels as identified by the Society of Hair Strand Testing, that doesn't mean that the court can't still make a finding that they do indicate drug use. Issues of contamination, I've dealt with that, but again, look at the possibility of test results having been contaminated. And one particular area, which I think as practitioners we're not particularly aware of, is that you can have the solution in which the hair strand samples were washed, you can have them tested. And that can be helpful at looking at whether or not there's a possibility that a positive result or a high result, for example, is to some extent affected by external contamination. So again, one of the questions is, do you want the washers tested to see if they've got a high level, for example, of cocaine, which may therefore suggest that the result may have been affected by external contamination. And I've dealt with this again, dating of samples, the rate of hair growth, how hair grows, means that there is potential leeway. It's not the science is wrong, it's how it's interpreted, whether the author of the report has all the information necessary in order to be able to give as accurate a time estimate as possible. This is particularly relevant in those cases where you've got an individual saying, I was using up to a certain point and now I've stopped, where you may have a result which suggests that they carried on beyond the date in which they said they're stopped, but questions can actually be raised which could in fact mean that the timing given by that individual isn't incorrect and may have been affected by the way that the rate of hair growth. So again, those are all matters to consider, even putting in the original request or in raising further questions in writing or in evidence. Effectively, I think that's all I can usefully say. What I really wanted to do today was just highlight those matters which we need to be aware of. I don't have, I can't give you definite answers to individual cases because each case is specific. But as I said, if you take away anything from what REH tells us, it is that we treat hair strand test results as any other expert report, and therefore we should not be afraid either to challenge it or indeed to rely on these individuals as experts, and therefore expect any challenge to them to be have to have the same weight and strength of argument as you would if you wanted to challenge any other expert. I hope that was of some use, and I don't think there's anything more I can add. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Ronan. Okay, just to summarise, so in his September 2007 judgment, Mr. Justice Peter Jackson reinforces the science and the importance of hair testing in family law and child care casework. The test results should be treated as part of the wider picture, and we do recommend that hair testing is used alongside other forms of evidence rather than isolation, such as clinical judgments, assessments, and medical reviews. Experienced experts in toxicological hair testing should be used to accurately interpret the analysis results, and when instructing testing, it is important to seek advice on the most suitable type of analysis for your case. Okay, so that concludes today's event. I would like to thank you again for joining this afternoon's webinar. I'd also like to thank Ronan at 14 for co-presenting today. Details of our next event will be released soon, and we hope to see you there. Thank you ever so much. Thank you.